April 26, 1986. A routine safety test goes catastrophically wrong at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Pripyat, Ukraine. What followed was one of the worst nuclear disasters in history, leaving a lasting impact on the world. Our journey begins on that fateful day, as we delve into the events leading up to the explosion and the immediate aftermath. 1986. The Chernobyl disaster unfolds. Reactor 4 explodes, releasing a cloud of radioactive material into the atmosphere. The nearby city of Pripyat is evacuated, and the world watches in horror as the extent of the catastrophe becomes clear. We hear first-hand accounts from survivors, recounting the chaos and confusion as they fled their homes, uncertain of what lay ahead. In the weeks and months that followed, efforts to contain the radiation and prevent further catastrophe were undertaken. The heroic actions of firefighters, liquidators, and scientists are highlighted as they worked tirelessly to mitigate the disaster. As time passes, the true scale of the disaster becomes apparent. The Chernobyl exclusion zone is established, spanning 30 kilometers in all directions from the plant. It becomes a haunting reminder of the dangers of nuclear power. Today, over 3 decades later, the effects of the Chernobyl disaster still linger. The area remains largely uninhabitable, with wildlife reclaiming the abandoned buildings and vegetation reclaiming the land. The Chernobyl disaster had far-reaching consequences beyond Ukraine. It sparked debates about nuclear safety and the risks of nuclear power worldwide. We explore how the disaster influenced policy decisions, shaped public perception, and inspired new approaches to disaster preparedness. Researchers continue to study Chernobyl. To understand the Chernobyl disaster, we must examine the series of errors and technical failures that culminated in the catastrophic explosion of Reactor 4. During a routine safety test known as the SCRAM procedure, operators at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant made critical mistakes that ultimately proved disastrous. One key error was the decision to disable safety systems and reduce reactor power to dangerously low levels. In an attempt to simulate a power outage scenario, operators initiated a shutdown of the reactor's cooling systems and inserted control rods to slow down the nuclear reaction. However, due to design flaws in the RBMK reactor and a lack of understanding among operators, the reactor entered an unstable state. The RBMK reactor used at Chernobyl had several inherent design flaws that contributed to the disaster. One critical flaw was the positive void coefficient, which meant that as coolant water turned to steam, it became less effective at slowing down the nuclear reaction. This created a feedback loop where increasing steam formation led to greater reactor power, known as a positive feedback effect. As the reactor power surged out of control, operators attempted to manually insert control rods to shut down the reactor. However, due to a combination of design flaws and operator error, the control rods became stuck, exacerbating the situation. With the reactor running at dangerously high power levels and safety systems disabled, a sudden power surge triggered a catastrophic explosion. The reactor's graphite moderator ignited, causing a massive steam explosion that blew off the reactor's roof and released a plume of radioactive material into the atmosphere. In addition to technical failures, human factors played a significant role in the Chernobyl disaster. A lack of proper training, communication breakdowns, and a culture of secrecy within the Soviet nuclear industry contributed to the chain of events that led to the explosion. Operators at the Chernobyl plant were under pressure to complete the safety test quickly and may have felt pressure to overlook safety protocols to meet deadlines. This combination of technical flaws and human error created a perfect storm of conditions for disaster. The Chernobyl disaster serves as a stark reminder of the importance of rigorous safety protocols, comprehensive training, and transparent communication in the operation of nuclear facilities. By studying the errors and failures that led to Chernobyl, we can strive to prevent similar tragedies in the future and ensure the safety of nuclear energy worldwide. In the aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster, the workers at the nuclear power plant, along with firefighters and emergency responders, faced unimaginable challenges and risks. Immediately following the explosion, firefighters rushed to the scene to battle the raging fires and prevent the spread of radioactive contamination. Many of these brave individuals were unaware of the full extent of the danger they were facing, and their efforts were heroic but ultimately futile in preventing the catastrophe. Meanwhile, workers at the Chernobyl plant, including engineers, technicians, and operators, were tasked with containing the damage and preventing further escalation of the crisis. These workers faced extreme radiation levels as they entered the contaminated reactor building to assess the damage and implement emergency measures. Despite the immense risks to their own health, these workers remained dedicated to their duties, risking radiation exposure to prevent an even greater disaster. Many of them worked tirelessly for days, weeks, and even months in hazardous conditions known as liquidators to contain the radioactive contamination and stabilize the situation. Unfortunately, the Chernobyl workers and liquidators paid a heavy price for their bravery and sacrifice. Exposure to high levels of radiation resulted in acute radiation sickness for many, with symptoms ranging from nausea and vomiting to severe burns and organ damage. Some of these workers faced long-term health consequences, including an increased risk of cancer and other radiation-related illnesses. Today, the courage and selflessness of the Chernobyl workers and liquidators are remembered and honored as symbols of sacrifice in the face of disaster. Memorials and tributes stand as reminders of their bravery and the human cost of the Chernobyl tragedy. The story of the Chernobyl workers serves as a poignant reminder of the sacrifices made in the pursuit of nuclear energy and the importance of prioritizing safety and protecting those who work in hazardous environments. Their legacy lives on as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. In the chaotic aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster, vehicles played a crucial role in the response efforts, from transporting firefighters and emergency responders to evacuating residents from the affected areas. Ambulances rushed to the scene to provide medical assistance to those injured in the explosion and subsequent fires. These vehicles became heavily contaminated with radiation, making them unusable for further rescue operations. Similarly, police cars, fire trucks, and other emergency vehicles dispatched to the Chernobyl plant became contaminated with radiation as they approached the scene of the disaster. Despite efforts to decontaminate these vehicles, many were deemed too radioactive for further use and were abandoned in the exclusion zone. In the days and weeks following the disaster, authorities implemented measures to contain the spread of radiation from contaminated vehicles. Some vehicles were buried in trenches or covered with a layer of concrete to prevent further contamination of the environment. Additionally, aircraft used for aerial surveillance and radiation monitoring over the affected areas faced contamination risks. Helicopters and drones were deployed to assess the extent of the damage and monitor radiation levels, but many of these aircraft were also exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. The contamination of vehicles in the aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster underscores the far-reaching impact of the nuclear accident. It serves as a stark reminder of the challenges posed by radioactive contamination and the importance of thorough decontamination procedures in nuclear emergencies. Today, the abandoned vehicles scattered throughout the Chernobyl exclusion zone stand as silent reminders of the human and environmental toll of the disaster. They serve as a haunting testament to the enduring legacy of Chernobyl and the ongoing efforts to mitigate its impact on future generations. Join us as we delve into the complex legacy of Chernobyl, reflecting on the lessons learned and the ongoing quest for nuclear safety in a world still haunted by the specter of disaster.